Live on this second session of the different streams this afternoon, and I hope everyone's managed to come in okay. But of course, we are recording this, and you'll get the recording afterwards if you've missed any bits. So I have the huge pleasure of welcoming Jay Surtee. She was on the board with us last year, so I've had the privilege of working with her on the WES board, which was fantastic. And Jay is a business presentation consultant and author, and also, as I said, a former board member and trustee of WES. And Jay is going to talk to us about leadership and personal brand, very important topic. So I'll hand over to you, Jay. Thank you.
Okay. If you could just put up the slides. Actually, let me see if I can do that.
I'm seeing the slides.
Ah, you are. Yeah, they're up now. Okay, great. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to do a little whistle-stop tour through personal brand and how that's important to leadership. So I will share some tips for the next 25 minutes or so, and we'll leave some time for questions at the end. So if you can pop them in the chat, Alex and I will then have a look at them later. So leadership development. I think the two ideas here of personal development and personal brand are intrinsically linked to developing as a leader, particularly in this sector. So let's dig a little bit deeper and look at them separately. Personal development, we kind of think of that as working on our technical skills and also soft skills. So if we look at the top half of this slide here, I really believe that it starts with self-awareness, and that is understanding where your strengths and weaknesses are, so that then you can take practical steps towards honing your skills and filling in the gaps. And a good way to get a sense check of where those strengths and weaknesses lie are to get some kind of feedback. And quite often you'll get immediate feedback from the results that you achieve, but also by asking other people, you know, what they think and what their perception is. So here you'll see I've put receiving and in brackets giving feedback. And the giving part is, as a leader and a manager, a big part of your role will be to give other people feedback so that they can help develop in technical and soft skills areas as well. So it's quite important when we look at leadership development to understand the value of feedback, both personally and to be able to give that to other people. And then looking at goals, having some kind of personal development plan to track where you are and where you'd like to get to. Quite often we'll see this in your annual review or appraisal with the organization that you are currently working with or are about to, if you're still a student. And it's something that you'll hear quite often, either called a review, appraisal, or a personal development plan. But essentially, it's just a way of tracking the goals that you want to work towards and steps, the roadmap in a way, to achieving them. So I'll come on to that in a little bit more detail in a moment. Bottom half of this slide, this is about personal brand. And that is essentially what people think about you, what your reputation is, professional, as a person, your integrity, and a lot of that is linked with you building a network. So people that you interact with, whether that's colleagues or clients or other people that are going to be coming into your life professionally and personally. And then within that network, it's raising your profile so people understand who you are and what you have to offer. And the way that you could do that is through presentation skills, being more assertive, speaking up, asking for opportunities, looking for them. So all of that is linked to how do you become more visible and how do people know what it is that you can offer. So one way that you could, if we're looking at your personal development, one way that you could brainstorm is by carrying out a SWOT analysis. So I'm sure that all of you are pretty familiar with what a SWOT analysis is, and you will carry it out in terms of an organization's strategy or in terms of a project. But I think it's a really useful brainstorming tool to look at your own personal growth. And essentially, it's just breaking down into 4 areas, analysing and having a think about what your strengths are, where your weaknesses might lie, any threats to you achieving the goals that you want to go after, and opportunities that you could focus on. So some of the questions that you could ask when you are brainstorming, where you want your career or your goals to be are, what are the resources? What's unique about me? So what do you do well? What could you improve? And that's, some people would say that's a weakness, but actually flipping it over and just thinking about, okay, what could I do more of? What could I do better? Threats, usually we think about those as being outside of our control. So it could be the current climate, the job market, competition, but it also could be things that personally get in the way. So if, for example, being able to prioritize is a challenge for you, that could stop you meeting deadlines. And so that's something that could actually fall into the threat area. And when you become more consciously aware of that, then you can do something about it if you want to. And then finally, opportunities. These are the obvious ones. Opportunities are job opportunities or projects that you could get involved in. But also looking at, I mentioned earlier, building your networks. It could be opportunities to meet influential people or people that would be really useful to get to know. So there are lots of different ways in which you could use this brainstorming tool, but I'm going to give you a very simple example. So if we start off with strengths, it could be that you speak more than one language, and that could be useful in terms of career building and opportunities. You've worked on certain projects that are really interesting that you could talk about, because that demonstrates the other skills that you have in terms of leadership, managing a team, being able to prioritize, meet deadlines, and being a team player. Weaknesses could be something that I've just mentioned. It could be time management or not being able to prioritize because you just get so caught up in the moment. It could be gaps in your technical knowledge, and it could be don't really enjoy networking, and that's something that is a challenge for a lot of us. So even though we know that it's a good thing to be able to do, it doesn't mean it makes it easier. So it can be uncomfortable. Threats, we've just mentioned, could be competitors, other people going for the same job opportunities. Personal traits can also fall into threats, and the market. Opportunities might be a new role or a job opportunity that you are wanting to go for. It could be that the industry has changed. So let's say, for example, very broad, straightforward example, renewable energy. The world is changing. So does it mean that you shift your focus because that's where the opportunity lies, but still overlaps with what you are passionate about? And networking is also something that drops into opportunities. So I mentioned earlier about getting feedback, receiving feedback, and this is another brainstorming tool. It kind of looks similar to the SWOT analysis. It's basically just splitting it into 4 areas. If we start with number 1, this is the open area, is what you see is what you get. There's something that I know about myself and that you know as well. So it could be, I'm really good at building relationships and teamwork, and that's obvious. Everybody knows that about me. 3, the hidden area, that's something that I know and I don't want to share, or other people don't know about me. And it could be that I really hate speaking in public, but because there's an expectation, I don't feel comfortable in telling people about it, but that's my choice. I don't want to share that. The unknown area is something that I don't know and that you don't know either. And that's literally a situation that just hasn't happened. So it could be that you have a hidden skill, but the situation hasn't occurred where you have been able to find that out. But what I really want to focus on here is the blind area. And this is really what ties in with getting feedback. It's a blind spot for you personally, or a perception that you have, but other people see it differently. So if we link it back to leadership, communication is a very big part of it. And you've got to be able to inspire and motivate team members. So it could be your particular style is very direct, both in email and when you are face-to-face with people. And to you, that might seem like you're just getting straight to the point. But to other people, particularly junior members of the team, it might feel as if it's a very abrupt style and they might not respond to that quite well. So being able to get feedback in those sorts of situations helps you make a choice in terms of what you want to do to develop in that area, or whether you want to make any shifts in your particular communication style. So feedback is really important to leadership development. And then, of course, the personal development plan or the appraisal or annual review that I talked about. I've put together a very straightforward goal-setting example here. And if you've already been through this process, you'll know what that looks like. But this is just very clearly at the top, looking at the goals that you want to work towards. What do I need to learn and why do I need to learn it? Or what do I need to change? And then the action is the second box. What will I do to achieve it? The third one is, what support or resources do you need? And the fourth, really important, how will you know it's made any difference? So what does success look like in terms of that particular goal? And of course, the timing of it. When you're going to start to do something about it, and when will that goal be completed? And finally, how often are you going to renew it? So again, very simple example. Let's just say I want to work on my presentation skills because I don't feel very confident, or, as you become more senior and you develop as a leader, you have many more opportunities to speak in front of groups, to talk about projects, to actually be an ambassador for your organization. So that would be my goal. I want to improve my presentation skills. The action that I would take to develop that would be to book some speaking slots. So it could be a situation like this at this particular conference, that you become either a panelist or a speaker delivering a seminar, or even within the actual company that you're working for, or your team project, if you're working on a university project, is taking an opportunity to speak and present something, even if it's just for 5 minutes, so that it gives you the opportunity to practice. And then resources or support could be, you need some training courses, there might be some books that you could read, or you work with a coach or a mentor to help you towards that. And then what would success look like? So improving presentation skills can be a very broad topic, but what does that mean for you? And is it just you feel much more confident every time you present? Or if you are in an employment situation and you have a line manager, the feedback that they give you could be, yeah, that was better than last time. So you've got somewhere to work towards. So it's identifying, you're making progress. And then, of course, the time, when will you start and when will you finish? And maybe you review that goal every 3 months. So that was a whistle-stop tour of, looking at the personal development side of it and developing skills. Before I move into the brand part of it, I just want to touch on mentoring. Working with mentors can be hugely beneficial. They are there to be a sounding board, to give you a nudge, hold you accountable. So when you're working on goals, it can be really useful to have a mentor on your team. But it links in with personal brand as well, because remember I talked about developing your network. The mentors that you work with can open up their networks to you. They can be introducers for you. So it's a big topic, and I'm not going to be able to spend time talking about it now, but I do want you to bear it in mind. And WES has a mentoring program called Mentor Set. So, there are lots of ways in which you can access mentors, but it could be somebody in your organization that you could reach out to. So linking that into then personal brand, what is a personal brand? When you're not in the room, it's what people say about you, or, what the perception is. Essentially, it exists. Your brand exists whether you do something about it or not. So what I'm going to share over the next few minutes are some tips on how you can actually be proactive and manage your brand. Presentation skills is one way that you can develop your brand. It is about visibility. And here's the point. You could be the most amazing engineer, professional, whatever industry you're in, But unless other people know what you can offer or what you can do, then you're not necessarily going to get as many opportunities as you ordinarily would do. And quite often we think, well, our work should speak for itself, but not necessarily. You need to be your own advocate. So when you take up opportunities to speak, to present, whether that's just in a team meeting or at conferences or in front of clients, your visibility increases. But presentation skills is also really important with leadership, because you've always got to deliver messages to team members and colleagues. So it's definitely a skill that ties in both with personal development and your personal brand. There's a video that I always recommend that people watch if they haven't come across it already. So this is Amy Cuddy, and her TED Talk is all about the mind-body connection. And she does talk about some research around this, but essentially, in a nutshell, it's about how you can come across through your body language as being confident. Whether you believe you're confident or not, it is about perception. So I highly recommend watching this when you have a moment, or rewatching it if you've already seen it. So your online presence, like your brand, there is some kind of presence that you have online, whether you have accounts on any social media platforms or not. There will be something about you, and this is really you taking control of it and managing it in the way that you want, the perception that you want other people to have about you. So I've chosen myself an example. People will Google you, and we Google each other, and then that seems the obvious place to go. So for me, at the top of this page, you'll see there's a couple of links to my being involved in certain organizations, for example, WES. But at number 3 is my LinkedIn profile. So quite often, if you do have a LinkedIn profile, it will show up in the top 2, 3, 4 searches when people look you up. And so for the rest of this presentation, I'm going to talk about having a presence on LinkedIn, but the concepts that I'm going to share don't necessarily relate just to LinkedIn. You could use them offline as well, but it's seeing as most people are on LinkedIn, I'm going to make suggestions on how you can use it better, but also how you can improve your personal brand. So you're managing your LinkedIn profile, and as I've just said, you can use these concepts to have a look at your CV or resume, and networking generally. But for LinkedIn, here are key things that I think really deserve some focus. And they seem like obvious points, but you'll be surprised how many people miss some of these really easy to do aspects on a LinkedIn profile. So the first one at the top, your profile picture, that really needs to be professional without anybody else in it and really good quality. But the other area behind it, the banner, that's something that not a lot of people use. And you could put up images of projects that you've worked on or teams that you've been involved with that actually visually says something about you. So that's an opportunity to really showcase your brand or your personality. The heading, please use something other than a job title. So if you are a student at the moment, you might be slightly restricted, but it could be you can put in there what areas that you're interested in and projects that you've worked in. Have a look at other people's profiles and find some good examples that you could emulate. The about bit I'm going to come on to in the next slide, but here's another bit at the bottom that not a lot of people do anything about. It's the featured section where you can upload videos or blogs or places where you have been featured that might not be relevant at the moment, but will become more so at a later date. So that's a multimedia section where you can showcase some of the places that you have done some work or worked on projects. So the about section, this is your living, breathing CV, and you can change it every day if you want to, but make sure that you take the opportunity to use as much space that it allows, because you can put in about 2,000 words in there. And this is where you can really make it engaging from the first person point of view, to talk about not just the types of roles that you want to be involved in, but what do you do outside of work? How, are you a team player? What are you passionate about? This is somewhere where you really want to spend a lot of time and get it right. And it might take a few goes at adapting it, but it's definitely worth spending some time showcasing all your strengths. And then another area that not a lot of people do very much about is asking for recommendations. So further down, you can actually invite people that you've worked with, and it could be lecturers, but it could be people that you've been involved in terms of internships. Don't be afraid to ask. So getting recommendations, this then remains on your profile forever. And then last important areas are building a network. It's so important to be active in this respect. And in the context of LinkedIn, it's about connecting with people. And one of the questions I often get asked is, well, should I connect with people that I haven't met in person? Well, in the current climate, that's highly likely that you're going to be meeting a lot more people online than in person, because it's quite restricted at the moment. And I would say, yes, if you think you've got something in common with them and that you have mutual ideas or value that you could add, and the types of people that you want to connect with, obviously university colleagues, so the alum, but then as you progress in your career, colleagues at your current organization, previous organization. Why? Because people move around. So the more that you develop those relationships, the wider your network and the better the opportunities. And then lastly, when it is possible to go to events and networking events, using LinkedIn to follow up afterwards and to continue developing that relationship is so important. If you don't use LinkedIn, the concept is still very relevant. It's making sure we follow up. If you meet somebody interesting, putting it in your diary, giving them a call, sending them an email from time to time, touching base to just keep that connection going is really important. If you do connect with somebody online, very quick point, always send a personal message. It's much better than just clicking connect, because it shows you've made that extra effort. And then we've talked about speaking opportunities of raising how you raise profile, but other ways that you can do it, whether on LinkedIn or in other ways, are writing articles, getting your name out there, or a low-level way of doing it, very easy, sharing or commenting on other people's posts. So here are all the things that you could do on LinkedIn. Just liking somebody's post. Again, you're visible, but you don't have to do anything except like a post that you think is interesting. Resharing content, posting an update, tagging other people. You can write a blog on LinkedIn. You can just put it straight in there now. It has that functionality. Sending messages and developing your network. So again, it's very low effort, but it keeps that connection going. Looking at industry news, looking for jobs, and joining groups. So you can network within groups and meet like-minded people, like the event today. So this is what a post looks like. Here you can like, comment, and share. I'm sure you're all very familiar with it, but I'm just challenging you to be a little bit more focused in how you use these devices. And then I've talked about groups. Also remember, hashtags are quite useful as well. And lastly, just before I finish up and we get to questions, I always like to recommend books that I think are useful. So here we have The Startup of You, which is written by the co-founder of LinkedIn. And the reason why I like this book and recommend it is it talks about this concept of thinking of yourself as a product, as an entrepreneur. You are the brand, and what would you actively do to promote yourself? The orange one on the right here, this is all about networking and how do you develop those connections and develop good practice in terms of doing that. So there are some interesting stories in that. And I highly recommend reading it. And lastly, tying it all back to leadership, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I'm sure you've all come across this, but there are some really useful tips, particularly about the personal development plan within that book. So those are my 3 top books that I recommend. And I think we're at the 25-minute mark, open for questions.
Thanks so much, Jay. Really appreciate that. That was a great talk. Thank you. Yes, if anyone's got any questions either for the chat box or the Q&A box, then feel free to put them in there. One thing that I get asked quite a lot, or when I talk about people improving their LinkedIn and getting more active on LinkedIn, I often get asked by women, it has to be said, that it feels too self-promoting and that they feel a bit cringe about talking about themselves too much. So what would your advice be in that situation?
Yeah, I think it's just about increasing your comfort zone. And in my experience, all the women that I've worked with and collaborated with, it tends to come up quite a lot. We feel like we're shouting too much about ourselves, and there is a fine line. But I think, just speaking to my female colleagues, we don't promote ourselves enough. And if you look at our male colleagues, they do it more often. And I think it's just finding a way that feels comfortable for you. So there are different levels to behaving on LinkedIn. So if it's just liking or posting a comment on someone else's post is all you're willing to do, that's fine. People still see you. So it comes with experience, and the more you do, the more comfortable you feel. But I can't recommend it enough. I think, well, all I want to say on this is, if you don't talk about yourself, who else will?
Yeah, it's great advice. And like you said at the beginning, you will have a brand whether you create it or not. So you may as well create the brand you really want and like the posts that are aligned with your values and comment on things that are in a technical interest area of yours. And, that all builds up your brand, which is so important. Yeah.
It's depositing in that bank.
Absolutely, yeah. And then you get more used to it. And although it may feel irrelevant for students and more relevant for people in their career, they will very quickly be in a career, and it's much easier if you've already started practicing.
Yeah, exactly.
And so with all this advice, huge amount of advice you've given the students today, if you had to pinpoint sort of one thing that you think is a key takeaway or the most important thing to do, what would it be?
Start your personal development plan now. So even if you've come across it before, have a way of picking 1 or 2 goals that you can keep working towards, so you get into that habit of actively managing your career, and put one of these networking goals in there, whether that is presenting and raising profile or meeting new people, as one of those goals. So that's 2 things I've recommended, but it kind of ties into the same thing.
Brilliant. And we do actually have a couple of questions. So one from Amanda: is there an easy way to write a recommendation?
Well, so the recommendation within LinkedIn is you literally send out the request to somebody that you're already connected with. So if you're not connected with them, but you know them, make sure that they're happy to be connected with you on LinkedIn first, and then you can send out that link to them. So they fill it in, and then it doesn't get published until you're happy with it. So it's really easy to follow the steps. You just kind of click on it on your profile.
Yeah. And another quick question from Ellie Jones: do you have advice for being easily found online, e.g. LinkedIn, when you have a common name? Ellie Jones, I get Love Island.
That is a tricky one, but I think the more consistent you are with the people and the comments that you share, the more people get to know what you're linked with. So that's not an easy one, but they'll match your face to the name, so they'll become more familiar with you. I think it's about being consistent though, so that you're front of mind all the time.
Yeah. And I know we need to move on, but just one last quick question from Sophie saying, what do you even comment? It feels strange if I don't know someone.
That's okay. I mean, if you feel like they've said something that is of interest to you, that's okay. And the whole thing about LinkedIn is widening your network, and that's really where it starts, getting to know people. Just a really sort of low level comment, say that, for example, I really like what you said about X. In my experience, I found X, Y, and Z, and you'd be surprised how quickly an online conversation can start. So do a little bit and see how you feel about it.
Absolutely. so many people have linked in with me during COVID who I don't know because they've commented on something I've posted, and then we find a common interest. Exactly. So yeah, it's very powerful. Unfortunately, that's all the time we've got for questions. We do have others, but we're going to have to stop now, and we're going to head to a break, and then we're going to come back in half an hour. And that will either be for chartership and professional registration or introduction to multidisciplinary engineering. So you get to choose out of those two great options. Thank you again, Jay. Massively appreciate that. And we will see you after the break.
Bye.